My name is Daniel Briggs. I was 43 years old when the life I thought I'd built shattered in the span of one click. It came in the form of an email, no phone call, no video chat. Just a subject line that read, "Let's handle this like adults." I was 6,000 miles from home, halfway through a deployment with the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne. At that point, I'd been in Ramadi for just under 5 months. Dust coated everything, and the sun had this way of draining the color out of the world. I'd gotten used to it. What I hadn't gotten used to was betrayal. The email was short, 3 sentences. She'd filed the paperwork. She'd emptied our joint account. She'd moved her new boyfriend, Travis, into our house in Colorado Springs. No apology, no explanation. Just cold, surgical execution. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time, staring at the peeling paint on the plywood walls of our comms tent. The noise of the bass faded into the background. I couldn't hear the hum of the generators, the idle chatter, the boots crunching gravel. I stood up, walked to the communal showers, and let the water run over me until it turned cold. I didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't even think. When I got back to my cot, I typed a one-word response. Understood. That was it. No anger, no questions, just silence. That was my answer to everything. "Something up?" asked Martinez, my bunkmate, not looking away from his dog-eared copy of The Old Man and the Sea. "Yeah," I said, my voice calm, too calm. "Just some stuff at home." He nodded, and that was that. Men like us, we knew when not to ask more. But the truth is, I wasn't blindsided. Not really. 6 months before I deployed, I saw it in little ways. Lena stopped asking how my day was, started working late at the chiropractic office, started going to the gym 3 nights a week, but never broke a sweat. New clothes, new perfume, new friends I'd never met, new lock screen on her phone. I never followed her, never raised my voice. That's not who I am. But I wasn't naive either. So I made preparations, quiet ones, subtle. I rented a storage unit under a friend's name and stashed away the things that mattered. My father's service medals, my mother's locket, our marriage license, the deed to our house, in my name only, thanks to a VA loan. I opened a separate checking account at a credit union downtown and redirected a portion of my pay. Not enough for her to notice. Just enough that, if everything went to hell, I wouldn't be starting from zero. The day I shipped out, she hugged me at the terminal and said, "Come back in one piece, okay?" Her eyes were dry. It felt like a stranger was wishing me luck. I should have known then. Maybe part of me did. But there's something about wearing the uniform. You believe in loyalty, even when it's not returned. You believe in fighting for what's yours. What Lena didn't know was that I was already preparing for this. And what she never understood was that I don't start wars, but I sure as hell know how to finish them. I met Lena at a 4th of July barbecue back in 2010. I'd just gotten home from my second deployment and was staying with an old Army buddy, Nick, in Pueblo, Colorado. She was radiant that night. Dark auburn hair tied back in a red bandana, white sundress catching the wind, laughter that cut through the noise like a familiar song. She was in her last semester of nursing school, though she ended up working as a receptionist at a local chiropractic clinic. "Less stress," she said. We were married 8 months later. In the early years, she used to say she was proud of me, proud of my uniform, my discipline, my service, but she never fully understood what it meant to serve. Her father was a CPA, her brother an orthodontist. The world of sand, steel, and silence that I inhabited was foreign to her. She'd ask when I was going to get a real job, not knowing that for men like me, the army wasn't a job. It was identity. It was the one place where I was both needed and understood. In 2014, we bought a modest 3-bedroom in the foothills outside Colorado Springs. A quiet place. A patch of peace I thought we'd build a life in. The mortgage was in my name, VA loan, but I added Lena to the deed. Because that's what husbands do. They share what's theirs. The first blow came a year later. My father died of a stroke while mowing the lawn. 6 months after that, my mother passed from lung cancer. She never smoked a day in her life. The grief hit me like a freight train, but Lena seemed more concerned with how it would affect our finances. I received a modest inheritance, enough to pay off our student loans and tuck a little away. It was meant to be our safety net. Instead, it became her launch pad. I deployed 4 times during our marriage, twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. Every time I returned, something felt off. Her smile tightened. Her touch became mechanical. She stopped waiting for me at the terminal, stopped looking me in the eyes when we were alone. "I didn't sign up for this," she said once, after I mentioned re-enlisting. "I'm tired of being married to a ghost." I understood her loneliness. I did. But I also knew the job. I couldn't change who I was, and I wouldn't apologize for it. In 2020, it all started unraveling. The signs were subtle at first. Lena started pulling away during phone calls, especially when she was out with friends. Girls' nights became girls' weekends. She'd talk about her friend Chelsea, who divorced her husband and was living free. She'd make offhand comments like, "What do we even have in common anymore?" I asked if she wanted to try counseling. She said we were just going through a phase, but some phases don't pass. They calcify. By that fall, she was coming home later than usual, smelled like cologne that wasn't mine, claimed it was from hugging clients goodbye. I didn't press. I didn't accuse. Instead, I did what the Army taught me to do. I observed, I took notes, and I prepared for war in silence. The night before I left for Iraq again, what turned out to be my final deployment, she barely looked up from her phone to say goodbye. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, like I was a neighbor dropping off mail, not the man she'd shared 10 Christmases with. I boarded that plane with a steel spine and a hollow chest, because something inside me had already broken. I just didn't know how much further it could fall. 2 weeks after that cold, detached email, I was sitting in the DFSC, our mess hall, halfway through a plate of powdered eggs and sausage links that tasted like cardboard, when my phone buzzed. I didn't expect much. Most days, it was just news alerts or mission updates. But this time, it was a notification from our banking app. A withdrawal. $88,500. Gone. I stared at the screen, frozen. My fork hovered mid-air, my appetite instantly replaced by a cold rage that settled deep in my chest. I opened the app. The checking account, our joint one, now held a pitiful $22.37. The savings account that we'd been contributing to for the better part of a decade, $47,000, our emergency fund, our safety net, our future, was empty. Every cent had been siphoned into an unfamiliar account. I set my tray aside and left the table. Back in my bunk, I called the bank using the base phone center. I'd spoken with this customer service rep before, a soft-spoken woman named Sharon. But this time, there was no small talk. She confirmed what I already feared. Lena had been transferring money incrementally for weeks, just small enough to avoid triggering alerts. But once I left for deployment, the big withdrawals started. The final one came 3 days after she sent that email. It was a clean sweep. When I hung up, I stood in that sterile hallway, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the murmur of soldiers calling home to loved ones, and felt like I was floating above my own life, watching it disintegrate from a distance. That's when Martinez found me. "Hey," he said. "Heard from Jennings you looked like hell at Chow. What's going on?" I don't usually open up, especially not about personal stuff, but Martinez wasn't just another soldier. He'd dragged me out of live fire in Fallujah once. We'd buried friends together. That kind of bond doesn't require explanations. "My wife," I said quietly. "She cleared out our accounts, moved another man into our house, sent the divorce papers last week." Martinez didn't flinch. Didn't give me the usual, "Damn, man, I'm sorry." Instead, he asked, "What's your plan?" And that simple question, rewired something in me. I didn't have one. Not yet. But I would. That night, while the others called their wives, girlfriends, kids, their voices soft with love and laughter, I sat on the edge of my cot and opened my laptop. Lena had probably forgotten I still had remote access to our home security system. I'd installed it myself during my last leave. Cameras in the entryway, living room, even the backyard. I logged in, and there it was. A stranger's truck in my driveway. A man I'd never seen before walking my dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my old college hoodie, sitting on my couch, the one I'd bought after my second tour with cash I saved from hazard pay. And Lena? She was laughing in the kitchen. The same kitchen I had gutted and rebuilt with my bare hands the summer before. Tile by tile, paint stroke by paint stroke. I watched them like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. But it wasn't fiction. It was a home invasion of the soul. That night, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. Colder than I'd ever been in the field. Colder than a sniper on a windless ridge. I opened a new document and started making a list. Call Eric, my old CO turned attorney. Review VA loan paperwork. Contact unit commander about early emergency leave. Check property refinance filings Lena had once mentioned. Secure my pension and military benefit accounts. This wasn't emotion anymore. This was mission planning. And I hadn't trained my whole damn life to lose everything to someone who thought she could play me like a fool. No. Lena wanted to end things like adults. She was about to find out how I operate when I go tactical. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. No fanfare, no homecoming. Just a red-eye flight into Denver under a name I hadn't used in years, and a quiet check-in at a rundown motel just off I-25. I didn't tell Lena I was back. That wasn't the mission. I called Eric, my old commanding officer from Fort Campbell turned private attorney, and we met up at a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where the waitresses called you hon and poured your coffee strong. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I feel like it," I said, gripping the hot mug like it was the only thing tethering me to this world. He handed me a thick folder, documents, timelines, transaction histories, everything we'd talked about. But then he slid over one more sheet. "What's this?" I asked. "Found it buried in the county records," he said. 3 months ago. Refinance paperwork. Pulls $330,000 in equity from your house." I stared at it. "Lena's signature is here," I said. "But that's not my signature." "Exactly," Eric said. Whoever forged it got close, real close. But they botched your middle initial. Stroke pattern's wrong too. I've seen your signature 100 times. This ain't it. She forged my name, took out a loan on the house, then drained our accounts and filed for divorce. I looked up at him. And the co-applicant? You're going to love this, he said grimly. She listed Travis, her boyfriend, as the co-signer. I exhaled through my teeth, pressing my hands flat on the table. You're telling me she forged my name, gave my house to a man I've never met, and tried to leave me with nothing? And it gets better, Eric said. Travis has a record. 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2019. He's not just a rebound. He's a con artist. Something inside me went still. Not explosive, not boiling, just still. What do I do? I asked, voice low. You decide what you want, Eric said. Do you want to disappear and start over? Or do you want to fight? I want what's mine, I said. And I want her to understand what it feels like to lose something she thinks she controls. Eric nodded. Then we take the fight to them, quietly. The next day, I drove past my old house. Her car was in the driveway. Travis's truck wasn't. I didn't stop, didn't knock, just kept driving, headed straight for the bank, the same bank that had approved the refinance. I walked in with my military ID, a copy of my signature from my license, and a stack of documents showing I'd been deployed overseas at the time of the alleged signing. The loan officer, a clean-cut guy named Jeff, paled when he saw the evidence. This is going to need to be reported immediately. I understand, I said. Already filed a police report. This is just a courtesy. That night, I got a text from Lena. Who have you been talking to at the bank? Travis said someone was asking questions. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I filed a legal injunction preventing any transfer or sale of the house without my written consent. I notified the county clerk of the forged signature and submitted a fraud claim with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Lena called me later that evening. I let it go to voicemail. Daniel, we need to talk. The bank called. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it, like adults. Those same words, from that cold email in Ramadi. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who'd seen too much to pretend anymore. Eric called later that night. Travis just got pulled over driving your truck, he said. My truck? I asked. Yeah, the one still registered in your name. He's got a suspended license. Vehicle's been impounded. Good. There's more, Eric said. Police found prescription pads in the glove compartment from the chiropractic clinic Lena works at. Not blank. I leaned back on the motel bed, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. She's stealing prescription pads? Looks that way. And now the police are looking into both of them. The game had changed. This wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. It was turning into something bigger, criminal. But I didn't feel panic. I felt something else. Momentum. The trap wasn't mine. But Lena had walked into it anyway. The next morning, I met with a bank fraud investigator named Thompson. Short guy, late 50s, coffee stain on his tie, and a permanent look of exhaustion, like he'd seen every kind of financial scam imaginable. But even he raised an eyebrow when I laid out the details. This happens more often than you'd think, he said, spreading out documents like a crime scene investigator. Spouse gets deployed. The one back home sees an opportunity. But they forged my name, I said, tapping the refinance application. They stole my equity. That's not just an opportunity. That's federal fraud. He nodded. We've frozen the loan funds. Good. But there's a problem, he added. Some of it's already gone. I leaned in. How much? About half, roughly $146,000. My jaw tightened. Where did it go? Thompson hesitated. Technically, I'm not supposed to share that. It's my name, my money, my house. He studied me for a moment, then slowly swiveled his monitor toward me. This is what we've got. Multiple wire transfers. All recent. All from the refinance account. But what stood out wasn't the amount. It was the name. Daniel Spencer. Who the hell is Daniel Spencer? I asked, more to myself than to Thompson. Not my department, he said, but you might want to ask your lawyer. I left the bank and immediately called Eric. Daniel Spencer, I said. Does that name mean anything to you? Hang on. I heard the sound of typing. 5 minutes later, he called back. Got him. Real estate agent. Works out of Parker. Specializes in quick cash sales. She's trying to sell the house. That's what it looks like, Eric said. And here's where it gets interesting. Spencer's closed multiple deals with Travis in the past 2 years. My stomach dropped. You're saying this is organized? That's exactly what I'm saying. Spencer and Travis have a pattern. They get involved with women, usually recently divorced or soon to be. The home sells fast and cheap to a buyer in Spencer's network. The woman walks away with a fraction of what the property's worth. Guess who collects a cut? Travis. 3 confirmed cases so far. Same MO. One of them, deployed Navy husband. Sound familiar? I sat down on a park bench, the weight of it all pressing into my chest. This wasn't just Lena being selfish. This was a playbook. She hadn't just fallen for another man. She'd become part of a scheme. Whether willingly or blindly, I didn't know. But I was going to find out. What now? I asked. I'm contacting the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Eric said. This is crossing state lines, military benefits, VA loan abuse. If they're targeting service members, it's more than just fraud. It's exploitation. That night, I sat in the motel with a beer in my hand, staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning. The betrayal had evolved. It wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. It was a predatory operation, and I was one of many victims. My phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Daniel, please call me. The bank's saying something about fraud. Travis got arrested driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, Who is Daniel Spencer? 3 dots. Typing. Then nothing. Typing again. Stop. Start. Finally, she replied, I don't know what you're talking about. I answered with just a number. $146,000. Multiple transfers. House listing. No reply. 10 minutes passed. Then finally, it's not what you think. But I knew exactly what it was. This wasn't a marriage. It was a setup. And the next time someone tried to sell my house from under me, they were going to answer to more than just a pissed-off husband. They were going to answer to the United States government. The next morning, Eric called. The FBI wants to meet. I didn't even hesitate. Where? They've had an open file on Travis and Spencer for months. Your case? It might be the one that ties it all together. I drove to the Spokane field office, heart steady, hands tight on the steering wheel. For the first time in months, I felt something close to purpose. Agents Patel and Donovan met me in a windowless room with a small recorder and a stack of notepads. They didn't come across like TV agents. No suits, no shades. Just 2 professionals who'd seen enough people's lives fall apart to know when the story was real I told them everything, from the email in Ramadi, to the forged refinance papers, to the account transfers, to the scheme Eric had uncovered. Patel listened intently, scribbling notes while Donovan watched me like he was reading a book only he understood. "Your case helps establish a pattern," Patel said when I finished. "It shows this isn't an isolated incident. It's organized, repeated, intentional." "What about Lena?" I asked. Donovan leaned back. "We're still determining her level of involvement. Could be she was manipulated. Could be she's a co-conspirator. You'd be surprised how often the line blurs." I remembered her saying we were house poor, that we should downsize. She'd brought it up a few months before I deployed, out of nowhere. "She mentioned refinancing once," I said. "Said it would give us some breathing room." I said no. "Did she push it after that?" "Never mentioned it again. Not to me." They made more notes, asked about access to my pension, benefits, digital accounts. When they finished, Patel slid her card across the table. "Don't confront her. Don't reach out. Let us build this case the right way." I nodded. Understood. That evening, I drove past the old house again. Travis's truck was back in the driveway. Lena's car wasn't. My phone buzzed. A text from her. "We need to talk. In person. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow at noon?" I didn't answer. Instead, I showed Eric over breakfast the next morning. "Don't go," he said. "Nothing good comes from a face-to-face right now." "I wasn't planning to," I replied, "but I do want to know what she's up to." At 9:30 a.m., we parked across the street from the house. At 9:45, Lena walked out, got in her car, and headed toward the park, right on time. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. Logo on the door, Spencer Realty. Travis came out to meet him, Daniel Spencer. They shook hands, talked casually in the driveway, then walked inside. "Should we follow them?" Eric asked. I shook my head. "No need. I installed cloud-connected security cams last year. Interior and exterior." I opened the app and tilted the screen toward Eric. The footage loaded. Smooth, clean, real-time. There they were. Spencer in my living room, snapping photos. Travis pointing out details. I turned up the volume. "Should list by the end of the week," Spencer said. "Got a buyer lined up. Cash offer as usual." "How much?" Travis asked. "We'll list at $470. They'll offer $420. Everyone walks away happy." "What about the husband?" Travis asked. "He's making noise." Spencer chuckled. "Military guys always do, but they're stretched thin. Deployments, lawyers, pensions. He'll settle, they always do." I turned to Eric. "You getting this?" He was already recording it on his phone. I sent the cloud access link to Agent Patel with a single message. Happening now. 30 minutes later, the street filled with unmarked SUVs. FBI agents surrounded the house. I watched from the corner as they walked Travis and Spencer out in handcuffs. My phone rang. Agent Patel. "We got them on tape. Wire fraud, conspiracy, intent to commit real estate fraud. The works. Your security footage gave us what we needed." "And Lena?" "She just arrived. She looks shocked." I looked down the street. She was standing on the front lawn, arms wrapped around herself, mouth covered with one hand, watching as federal agents carried boxes out of my house. "What happens to her?" I asked. "That depends," Patel said. "On what she knew, and on what you want." I didn't answer right away. 13 years of marriage, good years, before the betrayal, before the silence. But the Lena I loved. She'd left long before that email ever landed in my inbox. And I wasn't the man she remembered anymore either. The federal case moved fast. Faster than I expected. Travis cracked first, facing a mountain of charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, forgery of a federal loan document. He folded like damp cardboard, named names, gave up Spencer, gave up 2 more real estate investors in 3 different states, claimed he didn't know it was illegal, claimed he was just helping desperate women escape bad marriages. It was sickening how cleanly he framed himself as a savior. Spencer didn't go down easy, but when the recordings played, his voice clear as glass, mocking me, mocking soldiers, his lawyer didn't have much to work with. He took a plea too. 12 years, no parole for at least 8. Lena? That was murkier. She insisted she had no idea what Travis had been planning, claimed he told her I'd been hiding assets, that I was going to blindside her with a divorce, that I'd been cheating overseas, and the house refinance was just a way to protect herself. I didn't know what to believe anymore. She cried during the deposition, said Travis made all the suggestions, that he convinced her to move fast before I buried her legally. Maybe that was true, maybe not. Either way, we came to a deal, through Eric, through her lawyer, through long hours of back and forth. She signed over full ownership of the house, waived any claim to my pension or future earnings, signed a sworn statement admitting to the forgery of my signature, claiming she was pressured into it. In exchange, I didn't press charges. It wasn't generosity, it was strategy. I didn't want a court battle, didn't want to relive every detail in front of strangers, didn't want to give her the chance to play the victim publicly, not after what she'd done. The divorce was finalized 6 months to the day after she sent that email from the safety of our home while I stood in a war zone. No fault. Clean break. A line drawn between 2 lives. The one I thought we had, and the one I was walking into alone. The day the last document was signed, Eric called. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "Travis was sentenced today. 8 years. Spencer got 12. "Good," I said. "There's more," he added. The FBI confirmed they targeted at least 11 other military families. Army, Navy, Air Force, didn't matter. Deployed spouses, all of them. Same scam. Refinance, sell low, pocket the difference. A heavy silence filled the call. "Your case cracked it open. You might have saved a lot of people." I didn't say anything. Just stood there on the porch of the small rental I'd moved into. A tired place with cracked siding and weeds in the gravel. But it was mine. No signatures, but mine on the lease. Later that week, I sold the house. The one Lena tried to steal. I couldn't stay there. Not with the echo of betrayal in the walls. Not with the memories. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek out back. No neighbors for miles. I took early retirement. 20 years in the Army was enough. I got a dog, a German Shepherd named Scout. Started doing carpentry work. Nothing fancy. Just fixing up barns and fences for locals who paid in cash and fresh coffee. My pension covered the rest. I hadn't built the life I wanted, but I was building something new, something that couldn't be forged, something that couldn't be stolen. Months passed. I got used to the silence. At first, it was suffocating, the kind that wraps around your ribcage and squeezes. But then, slowly, it became a kind of peace. The wind in the pines, the knock of Scout's paws on the old hardwood floor, the creak of the porch swing in the mornings, when the sun hadn't yet broken through the fog. I didn't hear from Lena after the settlement. Not for a long time. James, Eric, I still called him that sometimes out of habit, heard she'd moved back to her hometown in Oregon. working at another chiropractic office, renting a place with her sister, rebuilding. Maybe she was sorry. Maybe she wasn't. But by then, I'd stopped needing the answer. One evening in early spring, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the postmark was from Texas. Inside was a folded piece of stationery. Plain, clean, handwritten in careful pen. "You don't know me, Mr. Briggs, but I know your story. My husband is in the Navy. He was deployed to the Pacific when Travis and Spencer approached me. Said they could help me refinance, give me cash up front. Something didn't feel right, so I backed out. But then the FBI showed up at my door and told me everything. Said your testimony helped them break the case. You saved our home. You saved our future. And I wanted to thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to just walk away." Her name was Rachel. At the bottom, she'd written one final line. "The truth mattered. Because you made it matter." I read that letter 3 times. Then I pinned it to my refrigerator with an old Army badge I hadn't touched in years. Some days, when the cabin was too quiet or the loneliness crept back in through the floorboards, I'd read it again. Not to remember what I'd lost, but to remember why I'd stood my ground. The system worked. For once. Travis was still in prison. Spencer, too. Lena, she faded into the periphery of my life, like a ghost walking out of frame. No more messages, no more justifications, just silence. Finally, welcome. And me? I split my days between rebuilding fences, restoring old furniture, and walking scout along the creek that ran behind my property. I'd stopped waiting for closure. Some stories don't end with justice or revenge. They end with a choice to reclaim what you can and let the rest go. Because what I'd built out here, quiet, simple, untouched, was mine. And no one would ever take that from me again. I used to believe betrayal was something that happened in a single moment. A choice, a kiss, a lie. But I've come to understand it starts much earlier. In the silence. In the moments when someone stops seeing you as real. When loyalty becomes an inconvenience and love a transaction. Lena didn't destroy me with that email. She didn't destroy me when she emptied the accounts or moved another man into my home. What broke me, and eventually remade me, was realizing how long I'd ignored the signs, how much of myself I gave away to keep a version of life that had already died. But I also learned something else. You can lose everything, your marriage, your home, your peace, and still walk away with your integrity. You can still draw a line in the sand and say, "Not this, not anymore." That line becomes your foundation. What they took from me, they took dishonestly. What I rebuilt, the cabin, the quiet, the man I became, I earned. No lies, no shortcuts, and perhaps most importantly, I learned that truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through legal paperwork. Sometimes it's recorded on a hidden camera. Sometimes it's in a letter from a stranger reminding you why it all mattered. So if you're reading this, if you've been betrayed, broken, left behind, know this: you are not powerless. You're the storm they never saw coming. And when the dust settles, if you hold your ground, you just might end up standing on something no one can take from you again. Your own damn